Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Claudio Sinibaldi. I'm going to present this paper by Timothy Besley and Stephen Quaid, Workfare versus Welfare Incentive Arguments for Work Requirement in Poverty Alleviation Programs. So the basic idea of this paper is that the government is concerned to ensure that each individual gets a minimum income level of Z, which is the poverty line. So the policymaker has to choose the poverty alleviation program that is subject to the constraint that everybody gets a minimum income level of Z, but also the government's objective is to minimize the total cost of the program. So the poverty alleviation program is a pair of benefit package in which BI represents the cash transfer to an individual of ability type I, while CI is the work requirement needed to obtain the package. It's the famous cleaning graffiti that we have heard about during the lesson. We can see from the last part of the slide that even if an individual accepts the package, the individual could continue to supply some labor in the private market, and the effect of the work requirement is to reduce the labor supplied in the private market, and it of course has an effect also in the private sector earnings, reducing them. We can define the utility of an individual with ability type I equal to the benefit from the government plus the total private sector earnings minus the effort of working in the private market and the effort of working in the public sector. To make the problem interesting, we will assume that only one group of the target population is poor, so is below the poverty line Z. Establishing a benchmark case, we will define the optimal poverty alleviation program when individuals' earnings abilities are observable to the policymaker and beyond the individual's control. So in this case, the government is sure that each individual will get the benefit package intended for him. In this case, the policymaker who chooses the poverty alleviation program is subject to these two constraints. The first one is that each individual the individual who accepts the package must be willing to participate in the program, and so he has to gain a better off position, and the poor must escape the poverty. The solution to this benchmark case is straightforward, since we have seen that by imposing a work requirement as an effect to the private sector earnings of the individual. So it would only increase this gap and then increasing the total cost of the poverty alleviation program. So when income generating abilities are observable and beyond the individual's control, the cost minimizing poverty alleviation program is the welfare solution, the welfare program. Switching to the screening arguments for work requirement, the authors' assumptions are that while the government here knows the distribution of abilities in the target population, is unable to observe each individual's income generating abilities. So the government knows that a fraction of gamma is of low ability type, and a fraction equal to 1 minus gamma is of high ability type. For the poverty alleviation program then to be implementable, the policymaker must respect also the requirement of incentive compatibility, meaning that an high ability individual or low ability instead prefers the benefit package intended for him to masquerade as a low ability individual or high ability instead. The two polar cases in the screening argument are: the first one is with unobservable private sector earnings. In this case, the incentive compatibility constraints take this form, since the high ability individuals who want to masquerade as a low ability individual now can continue to work in the private sector, in the private market as much as they like, since private sector earnings are unobservable. So, in this case, if the policymaker had no recourse to the work requirement, the transfer to both groups, high ability groups and low ability groups, will be the same. So, meaning that the poverty alleviation program could not discriminate between types. If instead the policymaker had recourse to the work requirement, the poverty alleviation program achieved self-selection, since now, with the work requirement, the high ability individual who wants to masquerade as a low ability type has to face an higher opportunity cost of supplying hours of his time behaving as a low ability individual. So we can see in the graph that with the work requirement, the high ability individual who masquerade has no incentive, is the dashed line, has no incentive to masquerade as a low ability individual. So we can say that this package, which recur to the work requirement, BL prime and CL prime, is incentive compatible. The cost of using of recur to the work requirement is, as we said before, is trades off the cost savings due to lower transfer to the non-poor, since they have no incentive to masquerade, and the higher transfers due to the poor, since by imposing a work requirement, the total private sector earnings will be reduced. We need now to introduce the concept of separating work requirement, which is the work requirement that, if it coupled with a benefit, which is this benefit, high enough to get the poor to the poverty line, makes high ability individuals indifferent between claiming the package and behave then as a low ability individual, or not receive benefits at all. This CLS, separating work requirement, is found between the intersection of these two cubes. So, in this case, by imposing this work requirement, the policymaker can, the workfare solution will be the optimal solution, so the cost minimizing solution, if the truly poor represent a small fraction of the target population, and if their earnings are smaller compared with the earnings of the high ability type. In the case, in the opposite case, when private sector earnings are observable, the earnings from masquerading are of course smaller, since now an high ability individual who wants to behave as a low ability type and claim the low ability package needs now, since the private sector earnings are observable, needs now to reduce its total private sector earning, and so needs to reduce the labor supplied in the private market. So the incentive compatibility constraint now takes this form. In this case, also the separating work requirement, which is denoted now with CLS hat, is smaller than the previous one, since the gains from masquerading when with private sector earnings being observable are smaller. In this case, the policymaker can achieve self-selection also by the welfare solution, since the policymaker now can observe the private sector earnings. So, with the welfare solution, the policymaker can offer different types with different transfers. We can see from the graph that an high ability individual who wants to claim to be of low type will be offered with a transfer equal to the difference between these two indifference curves. So this transfer is sufficient to deter the high ability type individual to masquerade. So we can say that the work requirement solution is less acute when the policymaker has the possibility of monitor the earnings of the individuals. Switching to the deterrent argument, the assumption of the authors are that income generating abilities are observable and the poverty depends not only on luck but also on choices made earlier in life. So we allow each individual to make an effort choice ex ante which influence the probability of being of high type or low type, and these are the probability. The third assumption is that individuals are assumed to know the structure of the poverty alleviation program when they make their effort choice ex ante. So they will choose the level of V which maximizes their utility function, which is an increasing function of an ex post difference between the utility of being of high type and the utility of being low type. Also here, the government's objective is to minimize the total cost of the program. The only difference is the endogeneity of the numbers of poor. Before to state our solution to this problem, we need to introduce the concept of a maximal work requirement, which is the work requirement that, if coupled with a benefit high enough to get the poor to the poverty line, makes the poor, not the high types, the poor, indifference between participating in the program or standing on his status quo, so not participating to the program. We can see in the last part of the slide that in this case the maximal work requirement is bigger than L hat, which is the total amount that would be supplied in the private market by an individual of low type in the absence of any program. We know that this kind of work requirement crowds out the entire labor supplied in the private market. So in this case, with this work requirement, the individuals who claim the package will not work in the private sector at all. The solution to this problem makes this work requirement a deterrent for the poor. Since, in fact, since the poor knows when they make their choice in effort ex ante, since they know that if they will be of low type, they will have this kind of work requirement, then they will choose a higher level of E, and so reducing the probability of being of low type, and then in the future exposed, the society will have less poor, and it means that the total cost of the program with less poor will be smaller. So the poverty alleviation program will be optimal. Switching to the conclusion, we have seen in the paper that workfare crowds out private sector work, increasing the size of the poverty gap and the costs of poverty alleviation. The screening arguments for work requirement relies on the fact that the benefits due to reduced transfer to the non-poor exceeding to the cost stemming from reducing private sector earnings, but we have seen that this solution is most relevant for developing countries. So when the policymaker cannot observe the private sector earnings of the individuals. While the deterrent argument relies on the fact that the benefits from reduced number of poor must exceed the cost due to the lower private sector earnings. And this is the case if the policymaker, if the work requirement will be high enough to cross out the entire labor supplied in the private market. So if you have any question?
Thank you.